Hello and welcome to the Next Minute podcast. On the podcast, we're opening up the conversation around grief, mental health, no filters, no stigma, and I really want to say no bullshit there as well. But I won't put that in the intro. Every episode brings honest stories of struggle, resilience, and hope. Because even when life feels heavy, there's always light waiting to break through. Now, I won't lie, I am exhausted. For the past couple of weeks, for some reason, anxiety has been getting the better of me. I've kind of fallen into unhealthy habits. I'm not looking after myself. I've probably had, on average, 3 to 4 hours sleep over the last few days. For some reason, just struggling to sleep. I'll get in bed around 11, 12, and then I'll be up till 3, 4. That's without doing the doom scrolling or anything like that. Just kind of sit there awake, not necessarily thinking about anything that that's kind of prevalent or comes to mind. For some reason, I can't sleep. Could be anxiety. Like I said, it's because it has been a factor for the last few weeks. Like I said, when I'm laid there, there's nothing really playing on my mind or that I'm running over and over. The last sort of few days just been really really hard to kind of sleep. But I feel like there's a lot of positive stuff going on as well. At the minute, my auntie's 60th birthday. When was that last week? Surprise party. Load of family I've not seen before. Not seen in a while. And it was just a really good night. I took the kids there. They were brilliant, we was there from, I think it was like 6 p.m. till, I think it was gone 12, maybe 1 o'clock. Some of the clocks went back. And they're both just absolutely buzzing, loving life. It was great to see. I always remember, we come from a massive family. I think there's thousands of us. I think I know I've got over 100 cousins, and that's just on my dad's side. But I always remember, back in the day, as a kid, I'd be at those kind of family parties quite often. I'd be running around the dance floor, sliding on my knees, just prattling about, loving life. And it was great to see the kids doing that. And what I loved about it, because I know I said anxiety has been a really playing a part lately, in my sort of day-to-day life, but at that party, it happened a few, probably a year ago. One of the parties they went to was one of their friends. I think it was Cole wanting to get up and dance one of the kid songs with him. I can't remember which one it was. And I really didn't want to. The thought of doing it was just terrifying. Standing up there as an adult with Koa, and then just kind of thinking all the eyes are going to be on me. I know they probably wouldn't have been. And looking back, and if they were, who cares? I was dancing with my kid, and that was kind of how I processed it. So I was sort of fighting with them at this party. I was sitting in the middle. We was just having a really good laugh, and then when I was fighting with them, I would just kind of pick them both up and just drag them to the dance floor. Just I'd hold them both, just dancing around. And then I don't know if I accidentally swung Koa's foot or if Koa swung his foot himself, but we ended up kicking Elijah in the face. Only gently, just kind of grazed his face, but that kind of put an end to the fun. And then we just sort of went back to the table, sorted that out, and then went back to just prattling around again. And they went sort of off playing with the cousins. I was carried on chatting to family, so it was a really good night. And then later on, Elijah came over and asked if I would dance with him. So I got up, danced with Elijah, didn't even hesitate. Nothing, didn't even process the anxious side of it, where I would be thinking, oh, people could be looking at me, uh, anything like that. Cole did the same. Cole asked me to go dance with him later on. Was dancing with him. You know, I didn't even give it a second thought or no hesitation. Just straight up, just dragged them both to the dance floor when they asked. And that's stuff I would never do. I just can't stand the fact that usually I would get in my own head about it, and I'd either talk myself out of it or talk them out of it, find an excuse not to do it. And it was just really nice to have a night where I didn't care, you know, just straight up there, making memories, and that was the main thing. That was what I sort of looked back on it as. You know, for me, I made some great memories there, just sort of playing with the kids, dancing with them. Just never really done that before at those kind of events, so it was nice to, you know, feel like my old self again, I'd say. But what I want to talk about today, because it's constant in my mind about their mental health. I'm doing, I mentioned it before, children and young people's mental health course at the minute, and sort of the more I learn on that, the more, you know, my eyes are opened as to how prevalent the issue is, and the fact it's getting worse, it's not getting better. And there's probably a few reasons for that. Obviously, COVID played a big part. Stats jumping up. That was, what, 4 or 5 years ago. The stats are still going up. You know, there's still more and more children and young people being diagnosed or suspected of having mental health. And I've done quite a bit of research into it over the past week, and maybe that's why I'm not sleeping. Maybe that anxious sort of side of me is worrying about, you know, what their experience is going to be like. Obviously, Elijah and Cole's experience is going to be like with mental health. But it was interesting, some of the stuff that I found. Some of it I've learned on the course, some of it is through research I've done on my own. But what I've tried to do is just sort of make some notes. So this episode I'm going to try and focus on that, just to shine a light on, you know, how prevalent the problem is. And maybe, you know, if anyone can reach out if, you know, there's ideas, or if they're aware of any resources and support out there that would benefit kids that we can highlight on here. Maybe get someone in as a guest, but I think it's important. And I know I've talked about some of these stats before. I've talked about some of the resources available as well, but I just think, like I said, the more I find out about it, the more passionate I become about wanting to change something to help that, you know, the next generation, so to say. So here's some of the key stats. I'm pretty sure I've been through these ones before. So in 2023, 20.3% of children aged 8 to 16 had a probable mental health disorder. And then for 17 to 19-year-olds, it went up to 23.3%. Now in 22, among children aged 7 to 16, the rate was 18%. And among young people aged 17 to 24, it was 22. So we can see it's going up. You know, there's no hiding that fact. There's no getting around it. Now, what I will say is, and I'll touch on this later on, just keep in mind as I'm going through these stats, that these are stats where people have come forward with mental or probable mental health disorders. So these are, don't want to say the known cases, because I think there are some assumptions in the stats that factor in, but these are based on stats of people who've, you know, been on waiting lists, or they've sought treatment, either for themselves or someone they care for. Just keep that in your mind, that this is just the known cases, if you like. So for 2017 to 2020, the rate of probable mental disorder in children aged 5 to 16 rose from 1 in 9 to 1 in 6. And that, like I said, the stats have gone up, so I think that's 1 in 5 now. 23 to 24, there were 949,000 active referrals for children and young people to mental health services. Among those referred, only 32% had entered treatment. They're classing treatment as having 2 or more contacts. 28% were still waiting for the second contact. So I'm not sure if that's, they've seen the GP, but then they're waiting for that referral appointment, or if they've been referred, they've had the first session or the first consultancy and they're waiting for the next. So I'm not too sure. 28% were still waiting. And 39%, this one shocked me, so this is the majority, had the referral closed without accessing treatment. Some of those could be genuine. There could have been something done to identify that, that wasn't the right course of treatment for them. But there'll be, I would expect, a big percentage in there that needed that treatment, and either the referral was closed or they walked in because the waiting list was too long. I just think, we're only hitting 32%. Now, this is after they've sought initial treatments, they've sought, they've been to see the GP, or they've had some form of referral. There's going to be a ton of kids out there who won't want to get treatment, and there'll be a ton of kids out there whose parents or guardians, carers, haven't identified or aren't aware that there's something going on. So the average waiting time between referral and second contact in children's mental health services was 35 days. That's kind of the median for that period. And in 24, between April and October, urgent or very urgent referrals for under 18s rose by 10%. So that's only talking, obviously, this time last year. And in the same period in the previous year, it's just shocking. So those include cases where children were suicidal or seriously ill, with eating disorders, severe self-harm, thoughts or suicidal ideation. Now, quite a few stats there. I'm going to put some of these in the post, I think. But they were the first ones that were highlighted on the course for me. They were the first ones that kind of made me realise how big the issue is. And when you start looking at more in depth as to why those issues are there, I mentioned it in the last episode, I think it was 50% of the mental health problems we have as adults are with us by the age of 14, and then it rises to 75% by the age we're 18. So there's a lot of, obviously, it's a big period in lives in terms of development, expectations, educational expectations, social expectations, the pressure that's on us, the pressure we put on ourselves to fit in. There's a lot going on for kids at that age. It seems like, and I have done a little bit of research on this as part of preparation for this episode, but for my own understanding as well. But a lot of particularly in England, a lot of the focus is on treating the issues when they arise, as opposed to having a bigger focus on preventing or educating at a younger age. I think I touched on that a little bit. I've got some information around that which I'll touch on, but I think that's key. Just those stats we're talking about is obviously talking about the treatment side of things, not the preventative side as well. So this is going to be a very stat heavy episode, so I apologise. Age 11 to 16 year olds show a higher prevalence than 8 to 10 year olds. So 22.6% 11 to 16 year olds showing like a probable mental health disorder, compared to 15.7% between 8 to 10. Sex and gender surveys consistently find higher prevalence in girls and young women for anxiety, depression and self-harm. In my own personal experience, I would say I've seen a lot more self-harm in women than I have in men. And I was kind of aware of that anyway. But that obviously does vary between like age band as well. And there's going to be regional variations between the data as well. So, but yeah, particularly from what I've seen and from what I know, there is a high rate of self-harm within women, children and young women. Sorry, young women and girls. Now, when we look at the most concerning patterns, there's a high and sustained prevalence, so 1 in 5 in England. Now, globally, it's 1 in 7. So there's something going on with what we're doing or the way we're handling, this sort of mental health pandemic in children. And there's always going to be cases where it's unavoidable. We're going to go through grief. We're going to have, neurodiverse children. So neurodiversity has a high or a higher likelihood of that child developing mental health disorders. A lot of that will come from, probably likelihood of discrimination. Sometimes might not fit in. Bullying's going to be a big one. And like I said, generally at that time in our development as well, there's just a lot of pressure. A lot of things that are changing. And, there's just a lot going on. So there's a huge demand against constrained supply as well. So there's a ton of referrals going in. I think it was nearly 1 million in England. And that's combined with the referrals that obviously haven't already been treated or are still ongoing. So, I mean, we saw, I can't remember, 38, 39% were closed down before they'd even got to treatment stage. Waiting times and regional inequality mean outcomes depend heavily on where the child lives. Delays in obviously seeking treatment can worsen the condition, increases the risk of self-harm, issues with their education, and just more makes them more susceptible to it becoming a longer-term problem. Then young people in self-harm and suicidal ideation. There's a high prevalence of self-harm and suicidal ideation among older teenagers and young adults, which is obviously a massive concern. Again, touch on a little bit later on, but I think we need to be doing more in not in education, but around education, where we include it. Include education on good mental health, good how to cope with stress, and cater it to younger people, and how they can sort of manage and understand their emotions better. I think that's kind of where we're falling down. I think we're maybe too focused on the later stages of treating it rather than preventing it. And I think, again, that's backed up with some of the research I've done. And again, from what I've seen, there's not many resources that I'm aware of or programs that are more sort of preventative focused. Obviously, within this data that's been pulled, there's obviously going to be some caveats within there. We mentioned obviously this isn't going to include all the ones that go unreported or the ones that don't seek diagnosis or treatment. Underreporting, so I don't think everything's reported on or reported on accurately. And there's different measures and age bands and policies across the UK, so some of these stats will be reported differently as well, so it's kind of concatenated the whole view to try and give us a holistic picture. And then I had a conversation with my uncle at the party, and he mentioned how there's a difference in how England and Scotland try to work this problem. Mentioned obviously I think there is more of a mixed approach now in England, but certainly the main focus is and still remains on the treatment side of things. So it's more of a reactive approach, but they are looking more into and developing more that early intervention side of things through schools and family hubs, which we've seen cropping up. We've seen quite a few, particularly in Wigan, Warrington, Manchester, the youth zones that are coming up as well. They're doing a lot of great work. Scotland, however, have a much higher emphasis on prevention and early intervention, which I personally think is the way to go. Just from the course I've been doing. Now, you'll always need, obviously, the treatment side of things. There's always going to be cases, like I said earlier, you can't avoid. There's going to be children who face bullying, children who face grief, any form of adversity. They're going to face those challenges, and some of them will lead to mental health concerns or disorders. So you do need that blended approach, but in Scotland they do have a more structured and a higher emphasis on the prevention and early intervention side of things. And I kind of believe that is it. So England are more reactive, whereas Scotland are more preventative, but that's just, an overall view. There's obviously a lot of work going on behind the scenes and more of a blended approach, but the emphasis is clear between the two on which they're focusing on. So in England, the success of school-based sort of mental health teams and family hubs and wait time guarantees will be key in obviously changing, that swing. If we focus more on the prevention side, or have a heavier focus on it now, it cuts down the volume of children and young people that will need that intervention and that treatment-based solution after the fact. Like I said, you'll always get some going through, that's unavoidable. But without sort of stemming the flow, you're not going to meet the demand for, the referrals. It's just, you do need that blended approach. So both of them obviously face issues with funding, waiting time pressures, which is why prevention is probably key. But it does require that continual investment, that continual work. Obviously, the population level and rises is obviously going to play a key part in it as well. And we've obviously had the pandemic as well. So that pandemic, a lot of the kids who sort of were born or went through that at that stage were coming up to 4 or 5 years old. So this is where it'll probably start to be coming, to the surface if there's anything that's sort of come off the back of that. Parents with mental health conditions, a lot of us struggled in the pandemic. So if the kids have obviously been around adults with mental health conditions or who may have been stressed or struggle coping through the pandemic and they've been around that, it makes them more susceptible to developing mental health conditions as well. So I think, to kind of summarise, I think Scotland's doing it the right way in emphasising that prevention and approach. I think they do a lot with community-based supports as well, investing in that area and showing it is showing incremental improvements, but obviously still the challenges of many children continue to face long waits both in England and Scotland, and there's inconsistent access as well. So in some areas you'll get seen in a matter of weeks, in others you're talking months. And one of the stats was reading earlier, there was a percentage of kids who were waiting over a year. And that obviously doesn't include the ones where the cases were closed down. Now, what we can't do is say that one approach is more successful than the other. Obviously, it's going to take time with Scotland's approach to see the benefits. But I think we're definitely on the right tracks. It's probably going to be a while before we do see the benefits. I think there's a lot of learning going on for people sort of managing these projects. But there is hope out there. And we're seeing loads more support coming up from community groups as well. So, that's helping to sort of stem the curve. But there is, I'd hate to see where the figures increase to if, those resources weren't around. So, what I want to talk about now is I think it's a philosophy, a Japanese philosophy that I heard. And I can't remember where it was. I'm terrible for this. I'll see something. Usually when I'm doom scrolling, and I'll see something like I absolutely love that, and I'll bookmark it and I'll watch it over and over again. And then when it comes during the podcast, I'll reference it again. I'll completely forget where I've got it from. But it's a Japanese philosophy called, I'm probably going to butcher the names of these, but I think it's Wabi Sabi. And it's about finding the beauty in imperfection and impermanence and incompleteness. So the way it was taught to it was thinking like the scars on your body, they all tell a story. We don't have to, hate them or hate the reason that they're there. A lot of us, I've got a few, we tend to, or we can try and hide them away, or, it's not something you tend to show off. And obviously some of them can bring back really bad memories. But the philosophy does talk about how you kind of find the beauty in those imperfections. And it's all about embracing your flaws, the cracks and irregularities as beautiful and unique. Accepting that all things are temporary and transient, and then recognising that things are never truly finished and we have a cycle of becoming and fading. So it's just basically that continual, growth that we're all on. Our bodies are ever changing. And like I said earlier, those scars will all have a story. I've got one on my knee, which I tend to make up a story of. I was involved in. I was at a bank in Goulburn when there was an armed bank robbery and I got shot, and it just sort of grazed through my leg. The fact is, I just fell off my bike and hit a curb. But it's just one of those. It's a big chunky, it's only a small scar, but it's a chunky one on the side of my leg. And I used to hate it for years, and nobody ever commented on it. Nobody ever mentioned it. And if anybody brought it up, it was me. And even when it was done, I didn't realise until somebody pointed it out to me. But I think there was just blood seeping through my pants, and I hadn't realised. But it was something that I weirdly felt ashamed of, and it's not even like a bad scar. Like I said, it's chunky, but there's not a trauma behind it. But for some reason, I didn't like it. Now, the next part of this is, it's called, again, I'm probably going to butcher it, kintsugi. And it's the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold. The idea is it kind of highlights, so the way they use it when they're doing these sessions or whatever they're called, they'll have a piece of pottery and they'll break it as part of the exercise, and then they take gold leaf, sort of blend it in with the glue and the adhesive, and the idea is that when it's mixed together and then you fix the pot by obviously sticking the pieces back together, where the cracks or the scars are, there's now a gold sort of tracing through it. So where you would see a crack, or you might see a fake crack if you used some form of super glue. This one, the idea is it highlights the imperfection, and then you find beauty in it. So you've got the gold reflecting the beauty of those cracks and those scars. So the two of those are kind of mixed together in, like I said, in exercises where they will purposely break pottery and then use this as a teaching exercise to show, obviously, where something was broken, it's been mended, and the pieces are coming back together. It's a beautiful rekindling of pieces, if you like. And it's kind of the main focus is on letting go of the need for perfection and finding happiness in those imperfections and not holding ourselves down to them as well. So I just want to leave that with you. I'm not going to say them and sort of butcher them, but it was the Japanese aesthetic philosophy, wabi sabi, and the art of kintsugi. I've ordered myself a kit because it's something I want to have a go at. I think it'd be quite interesting to do, and I think so. Obviously, some of you might know I'm setting up with my friend Claire a community group to support men who are struggling with mental health. We actually went out today, and I said today, it would have been yesterday by the time you hear this, and we finalised our plots on an allotment. So what we want to do is just provide an alternative to men getting together, sitting in a room. What we want to do is get out to nature, have something to do, rather than the pressure being on talking. It's going to be we're doing something active, something that takes our mind off things, and the option to talk will be there. There'll probably be some prompts in there, some introductions, but generally the idea is just to get us out, get us active, take our mind off things, and then do something like this, something a little bit different. Obviously talking involved, but something that sort of leaves us with something as well. So we'll get stuff off our chest, but we'll leave with a tool that we can use to try and help our mental health and how we handle our mental health going forward as well. If you can hear any banging or rattling, the dog's just decided to join me. But yeah, there'll be more news coming on that. That's where the group's called MetaMem, which is probably another reason I've been swamped. So I've been doing a lot of reading up on constitutions and how they need to be filled in. There's just a lot to go into it. Claire's been amazing. I'm setting it up with. She's done a lot of the groundwork, to be honest. And to be honest, if it wasn't for Claire, I'd probably still be at square one. Claire's dragging me through it, which is good because that's the kind of person I need. I'm very good at procrastinating, but I think what we've got and our ideas for MetaMen going to be something different, and I think it's going to hopefully change some lives. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. I'll keep you posted on anything that's coming up. Other than that, we'll leave that there. Like I said, it was very stat heavy. It probably sounds like I've read through a script where I've literally just written down or bulleted some key facts that I've learned from the course, that I've found in my own research. I watched a video today on how social media impacts children and young people as well. So there'll probably be an episode on that. I'm going to do a bit more research on that too. But yeah, we'll leave it there. I've had a couple of weeks off. We're going to stick to 2 weeks, I think. Just while I've got a lot going on. It gives me a bit more time to get editing done, to get some guests in. We have got a few lined up still. Just literally just sorting the dates out with some of them now. And then we'll get you guys some episodes. Claire's going to come on as well. I can't remember if I spoke to her, but she's going to come on. And yeah, it's a very exciting time, a lot going on. I think the course I'm doing with the children and people's mental health has definitely given me some drive and some passion to do something in that space as well. And that's probably a conversation I'll have with Claire. She's going to be very much involved in anything. I do, no doubt. But yeah, thank you very much for listening. If you're a regular listener, I appreciate it. Follow, like, subscribe to all the really good stuff. And remember, you can always get through the next minute.